I am so delighted to welcome you to our 2015 International Disaster Psychology internship presentations. This is one of my very favorite nights of the year, and any of you who have been here before will, of course, resonate with that and understand why. You're going to hear such great stories tonight, and if you've been around to see the posters, already they're terrific, so we know some of what's to come, but these inspiring, interesting messages are just fantastic. I know that Dr. Judy Fox, who I'll introduce in a moment, will introduce the rest of the faculty and will introduce you to the students as well. But I wanted to start out by thanking, first of all of our community partners. I know there are some community supervisors here tonight. We're so grateful for your support of our students. I want to just give my thanks to our faculty and staff who support the program. But really tonight we're here because of the students, and you can imagine what an, in many ways, easy job that I have because we have these absolutely amazing students. You all really exemplify exactly what GSPP is all about in terms of our practice-based training that's designed to use psychology to make the world a better place. Can you imagine a better example of that motto than what we're going to see here tonight? You know, making the world a better place through psychology with the resourcefulness and the courage and the skill and everything that goes into what the students do. So students, we are so proud of you. Thank you for doing this. We're really excited to hear your stories. Thanks to all of you, and welcome. And now I can introduce the director of this very fine program, Dr. Judy Fox, who will tell you more about what we're doing. So thanks, Judy.
Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming out on this great day. I really appreciate seeing so many faces this year, faculty, family, colleagues, colleagues in the community, friends of the program, alumni. Thank you all for coming. Students, our students are here. And thanks to Stephanie Walton for helping us get this together, and also Catherine Miller, my graduate teaching assistant, who's both have done a great job. And also just to add that our international experience and training can't happen unless it's part of a village, and we have our great MA IDP faculty and adjunct faculty, and our core faculty are here tonight, Gwen Mitchell, Rohini Gupta, and Tom Barrett. I also want to thank the Harbor Lights Foundation for supporting scholarships for students when they go abroad. That funding really helps them incredibly. So I just want to say that you'll be listening to our students tonight. They are so composed and easily describe their sites and their work. They talk about it with ease, like it was no big deal. Their modesty, I think, really downplays the complexities they negotiated during their 8-week international internship, but our faculty knows the backstory. The backstory on our students is that we have adventurous, resourceful people who persevere to develop and utilize skills to engage relationally, to advance social justice and mental health globally. The backstory is that to do this on their internships, they need to master many things. From where am I going and how do I get there? What are socio-ecological and mental health issues of the region that I'm going to? What are the culturally sensitive psychosocial best practices that I might take with me? How do I find my way around? What do I eat and how do I get it? How do I handle myself safely? How do I develop relationships without fluency in the language? And how can I understand the work that the agency is doing and the theories behind their work? To how can I engage in a culturally sensitive way and use myself, my skills, and my knowledge to assist the organization in this very short period of time that I'm engaged with them? And it is a very short period of time, and they have to hit the ground running and do this quickly. Their internships are eye-opening experiences where they see possibilities of advancing mental health globally. The MAIDP faculty watchfully and warmly support them throughout the process. We hear about mishaps along the way. One group won the award for the most medical visits this year, and we warmly encourage their efforts. So this year we had 5 sites, Namakkal, India, Colombo, Sri Lanka, Johannesburg, South Africa, Mzuzu, Malawi, and Tamale, Ghana. And tonight we have a presenter from each site who will talk about what they all did. And all of them have helped to put the presentation together and have created these beautiful posters. And then after they've finished speaking, we open it up to questions or just milling around and talking. So let me introduce our first presenter, Catherine Miller, who went to Namakkal, India.
Hi, I'm a little bit too tall for the microphone. Thank you all so much for being here. I know that I'm personally very touched to share this with you, and I'm sure that all of my colleagues would agree. So thank you for taking time out of your evening to share our experiences with us. And like Judy said, I did go to Namakkal, India with Christopher. Can you raise your hand? And Charlie and Jamie. Yay. Who I'm also so touched to share this experience with because they are, as is everyone in our program, very wonderful people. So I wanted to start by sharing a quote with you that we found before we left. India is the cradle of the human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, the great-grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most instructive materials in the history of man are treasured up in India only. And Mark Twain said that probably a really long time ago. But this was a really good eye-opener about that really India is a country that is like rich with culture and diversity, and that truly, like as we embarked on this journey, that we were going into an adventure. So this is a map of the world. I'm sure this isn't new for you, or at least I hope that it's not. But just to be clear, you are here, see over there in the United States, and we were way over there. So when I say that we were halfway around the world, I'm not kidding when I say that. So I just wanted to make that really clear. So just a little bit of information about India. I didn't know this before I left, so I thought you'd want to know as well. So you can see that there are 3 maps. One is India, one is Tamil Nadu, which is the state that we were in, and one is the Namakkal district, which is the province that we went to. So India has 1.3 billion people. 1.3 billion. That's a lot of people. Just like a lot of people. Tamil Nadu has 72 million people, and Namakkal on its own has 1.7 million. So in comparison to the rest of India, it is fairly small. So there are 15 official languages that are spoken in India. It's a lot of languages considering that I only speak one. But the official language in Tamil Nadu and in Namakkal is Tamil, which none of us are proficient in, so please don't ask. But they have a very high literacy rate, and I think that's something that's important to consider and something that I didn't think was going to be true before I left. So just like to break some stereotypes here. 33% of the entire country is an urban population, which means that a majority live in rural populations, which is also true of the area in Namakkal that we went to. They rely very heavily on farming, so agriculture is a huge part of how they make money and how they kind of live their daily lives. And about 45% of people live below the poverty rate. 45% is almost 50%, which is almost half, so that's a lot of people. In terms of mental health, India as a whole has about 4,000 outpatient clinics for mental health and has 0.4 psychologists per 100,000 people, and only spends 0.06% of its overall health budget on mental health. That, in comparison to their 1.3 billion people, is really, really small. And in comparison to the United States, is even smaller. The United States has about 6,200 outpatient clinics, has about 29 psychologists per 100,000 people, so you can see that's a huge difference. And we spend about 5% of our overall health budget on mental health. So I'm not saying that we're doing better. I think that we still have room for improvement, but you can see that that's still a huge difference between how we see mental health here and how India practices mental health there. So I think it's important also to give some history about HIV. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. And since we worked with women who have HIV, it's important to kind of clear some of those things up. So HIV is the sexually transmitted infection interfering with the body's ability to fight infection and disease, which causes AIDS. So HIV and AIDS are not synonymous terms. They are separate terms. So I just want to make sure that when I say we were working with women with HIV, that you know what that means. In India, it ranks third highest overall in the world for cases of HIV. So it's a huge problem there. And in Tamil Nadu specifically, it ranks among the top 4 states with the highest rates of HIV and accounts for about 53% of all infections in India. Again, that's over half. And about 130,000 people in 2013 alone died from AIDS, which means that it progressed a little bit too far, and medication wasn't enough to handle it. And women specifically are at an increased risk for infection, and about 39% of all of the cases of HIV in India are women. So I think that that's also important to acknowledge. So why are women at a higher risk? India is not known for its gender equality, and there are like really staggering incidents of interpersonal violence. There's a lack of social support for women, lower socioeconomic status, so many things that really put women at just an increased risk in comparison to their male counterparts. Okay, so now you have all this information, so what do you do with it? And where did we go from here? Well, we went to CARE. And CARE stands for the Concern for AIDS Research and Education. So they are an organization that has been in Namakkal, India, I think since 2001. And their mission is to support and advocate for persons infected and affected by HIV and AIDS with programs of education, prevention, care, and treatment. And that's what it looks like. It's pretty adorable. And these were the 4 staff members that we worked with every day when we were there. Vijayarma, who helps keep the office clean and makes the women their food in the afternoons. And Sister Prima, who was our translator during our groups. Prashant, who is the office manager and also kind of our community navigator, really helped us get around since we didn't speak the language. And Malayama, who also shares work with Vijayarma and was very good about bringing us our tea and making sure that we drank it. So she's very sweet. And in India, often people don't smile for pictures. So this picture is really important because we did actually get them to smile, and look at how cute they are. So what were our goals before we left? We really wanted to increase social cohesion, to improve well-being, to establish community and systems of peer support, since we know that that's something that women lack in India. To build coping skills to combat negative emotions related to stigma and discrimination, because as you can imagine, just like in the United States, people who are living with HIV are stigmatized and discriminated against. And to continue education and awareness outreach through the local schools and staff training. So I'm really happy to tell you that we met all of these goals. So yay, us. Thanks. So in terms of education and training, one of the things that we did is we went to a local government school and we talked to adolescent children about healthy relationships, consent, personal hygiene, and puberty. And so that was really powerful. And Shirley and Christopher also did a 2-day staff training on some of like the counseling basics. So when we leave, what happens when we leave and people come in and they need some kind of mental health intervention? We wanted to make sure that the staff who's already there was prepared for that. So they talked to them about safety planning and active listening and the kinds of things that the women at that center clearly need. And I think like our shining glory of what we did while we were there was psychosocial education groups. So we had 3 groups that met once weekly, and we did a 6-week program, and we had 6 modules. So we talked to these women about individual strengths, stigma and discrimination, grief and loss, depression, self-care, and systems of support. So this was really, really important because what often we heard from the women is no one has ever asked me how I felt before. Really? like in a culture that we live in where we talk about how we feel all the time, we post how we feel on Facebook and Twitter and everyone can see it, everyone knows how we feel all the time. And in India, these women are telling us, no one has ever asked me that before. So just having a space where they could have those conversations for them and for us was extremely powerful. But sometimes talking wasn't enough, and we had to get really creative with how we got these women to engage in these topics of conversation that we wanted to talk about. So from the pictures you can see, we did some creative art stuff, which was really fun. We would kind of have them draw, like, how does this feel? How do you feel when it's like this? Those kinds of things. And we did a self-care day where we painted each other's nails. That was also a lot of fun. Even Christopher participated, and it was wonderful. And sometimes we would just do fun stuff after group, like teach the women how to count to 10 in English, which was so much fun. And they were so good at it. And then they would try to teach me how to count to 10 in Tamil, and I was horrible. So there's no videos of that. But if you ever want to see a video of us, counting to 10 in English, those ones, they did a good job. I didn't do so well. So if you ever want to see that, please let me know. But what I think is really important is the impact. So I would like to think that we made at least a small impact on the women that we worked with in India. But the impact that was made on us is monumental and sometimes indescribable. And I'm going to be honest that there is not enough time or enough things that can be said to make our experience adequate for you to understand. So you're hearing things, but nothing is ever enough to make you truly understand how meaningful this is to us and how we will never be the same ever again. But when we talk about it as a group, there are a lot of common themes that show up in our conversations. So this is this word map that you're seeing, some of these words that keep coming up. And courage is a huge one of those words. So when women would tell us about some of their daily struggles and the hardships that they went through, we would ask, okay, so how do you deal with that? And they would say, well, I took courage and then I was better. And while that's not adequate, we still want to break that apart a little bit more and say, okay, well, what does it mean to take courage? When you say that, what does that mean? It's something that we think to ourselves quite often. How do we take courage? How do we practice courage? What does courage look like? And I can tell you that these women have incredible courage and strength and bravery and things that I think the four of us will aspire to for the rest of our lives and possibly never accomplish. And Jamie's crying and she's going to make me cry. So I think some of the other things that we've talked about a lot is why is this experience important? And something that we should all strive to is that it taught us to be comfortable being really uncomfortable. It's hard to go to another country where no one speaks your language, and sometimes it can be really hard to connect. And we were lucky enough to be able to connect with people. But it's helpful in the work that we do here, because what happens when refugees come here and they feel like they're not connecting with people? That's an important experience for us to have. And it makes us more confident in the work that we do, so that we know when we're going out that we can work with marginalized populations and we can be knowledgeable that our work is valued and important and meaningful. And even though I think we knew that before, I think it's even more clear now. And I would say that we are all humbled and honored to have shared only 2 months with these incredible, strong and resilient women, and we will carry their stories with us for the rest of our lives. And we hope that you can carry this night with you for the rest of your life too. Thank you. Our next presenter is Hannah, and she went to Sri Lanka.
Okay, perfect. That was such a powerful presentation, Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing. And to complete the introduction of my cohort mate, my name is Hannah Herrera, and I, along with my fellow IDP student, Erin Shinasa. Erin, feel free to stand up, take a bow, maybe break into song, take the attention off of me. No pressure. We had the privilege of working with the Family Rehabilitation Center in Colombo, Sri Lanka. And so to echo Catherine's sentiment, I first off want to thank you all for taking time out of your schedules to be here tonight. You're affording us as a community an outlet to tell our stories, and more importantly, those of the amazing individuals we were able to meet all around the world. Not to mention, I'm sure our friends and loved ones who have no doubt been graciously bombarded with our tales and adventures are thankful we have a fresh audience as well. But before diving into the glamour that is working internationally for a minimally funded and understaffed non-governmental organization, I'm fairly certain you're all pretty familiar with this, I want to extend a heartfelt congratulations to the other members of my cohort for all they've accomplished this summer. We've made it to the second year, guys. There's a light coupled with a great deal of debt at the end of that tunnel. But now that I've sufficiently pandered to my audience, I don't think I missed anyone, right? If not, I'll catch you on the way out. But I'm up here tonight to do justice to the nation that took Aaron and I, for better or worse, in with open arms. So Sri Lanka is a small but mighty country in a region often forgotten on the world stage. I mean, how many people here are familiar with the language Sinhala? Full disclosure, you could have told me that Klingon was spoken there, and I would have believed you before the research I did before traveling there. So second, why Sri Lanka? Forewarning, I'm a bit competitive, so I decided to structure this like a Shark Tank pitch, so buckle up for a passionate sales spiel. The essence of this country can be unpacked through understanding who its people are. Throughout its long and complex history, this country has been religiously divided. A predominantly Buddhist Sinhala population, there have been consistent issues with the minority Hindu Tamil group, which stem from southern India. This has spanned centuries and is self-imposed division that comes up as a major theme. Along with this civil unrest, there's been a painful and long-standing history of colonialism, controlled by India, the Dutch, Portuguese, and finally, for good measure, the British. This island nation have only truly come into its own this past half century. Rough, right? But wait, there's more. While still bearing through growing pains, this diverse population also persevered through a brutal civil war between the Sinhalese and Tamil. This has encompassed heinous human rights violations for which the government and rebel group leaders are still being held on trial for with the UN. And this war lasted over 25 years, and it ceased in 2009, but if you travel there, you see it's not yet fully in their past. So last but not least, this nation, poor guys, encountered a devastating tsunami in 2004, and it hit mostly their eastern and southern coasts, the effects of which can still be seen a decade later. Here we are in 2015. Something to note, which I have up here, is the physical allocation of the coexisting population. So the Buddhist Sinhala, which are represented in purple, dominate most of the island, while the Hindu Tamils, in red, are concentrated in the north and east. These locations kind of explain the inequalities within the population. And so looking forward, so the largest population and industry growth in the country ruminates from the capital of Colombo, where we stayed, and which is in the southwest. And this is very underrepresented by the Tamil people. And so as a result, the Sinhala not only dominate in sheer number, but also through political and economic power in the city center. Not to mention the rural areas. If you look back at this map, the east and south, the rural areas where the Tamil population live were hit hardest by the tsunami and are just really struggling on an economic level. So despite these difficulties, there's a strong literacy rate. And there's a growing young population who have been exposed to the West. Their parents went through the war and they grew up in the aftermath, and now they want to come together. And so there's hope that they're able to carry a more unified and prosperous nation. And so bearing this all in mind, Aaron and I began our work with the Family Rehabilitation Center. And the organization is over 20 years old. It was conceived in the midst of chaos and trauma during the Civil War, and this organization established, as a result, satellite clinics in the most affected areas, helping these populations with safety, livelihood support, as well as psycho and physical therapy. Now that the population has started to reach an objectively sustainable level of prosperity, they've expanded their work also into public outreach and advocacy revolving gender-based violence and domestic issues, and that's kind of another facet of the issues in the culture that they're trying to address. And so where did we as outsiders fit into this mission? To be honest, at first it was kind of limited. We were linguistically tied and also flagged by the government and police. I like to think it's because of how intimidating Aaron and I are, but really there's always kind of suspicious of outsiders' involvement with NGOs, and so as a result, we were placed in a lot of administrative and editing work, which proved extremely tedious and frustrating as we decoded broken English for days on end. But it was extremely informative moving forward in our experience because it led to an improved training manual for the psychosocial workers, PSWs, or their psychologists, and we were able to add sections defining the therapeutic relationship and also add basic safety measures that can protect the worker as well as the client themselves. And so taking that knowledge, I was able to visit satellite clinics and interview these psychosocial workers firsthand, and as well as volunteers. And as a result, I was able to assess the strength and weaknesses of their programs. And what I found, I reported to the executive director of the organization, as well as the funder organizations. And so the kind of crown jewel, or maybe rupee, of our work included helping implement a conference for the staff. Specifically, we created a session that helped explain the difference between the concept of sex and gender and how that affects their work with the client base. And we had males dressed in saris and vice versa, women demanding their meals from the men and their houses cleaned. It was chaos, and they loved it. And it was very informative. And okay, how did this impact us moving forward? A better question is maybe, how did it not? Like, realizing how lucky I am to be a woman with choices and opportunities, to live the life I wish, not to mention the pleasure of being able to leave home unescorted after dark, scandalous, I know. And as much as I love my parents, I guess in this situation, marriage at my age would look a lot more appealing if that was the only way I could leave their house. Poor Aaron must be sick of my feminist rhetoric, but it's fine. We experienced the firsthand effects of generations of trauma and outside dominance. So these people finally had the opportunity to dictate their own culture, future, government, and they're like, wow, we've never been able to do this before, now what? So there's a lot of kind of trial and error as far as infrastructure, and despite all of the cultural and barriers and difficulties, these people are so resilient. They're so much quicker to be thankful for what they have. They find contentment with the small day-to-day joys of life. They would really give you their shirt off their back. They love America and are so quick to share their culture. There's this simultaneous pride and humility, and because of so long feeling inferior to the Western culture. And now, I'm not a cynical person, but at certain points I wondered, what possible motive did they have to harbor such appreciation for my country? I soon realized it's that America has been a constant support for their people along the way. It has overshadowed any common felt negative political or social connotations that might be found in other areas of the world. You can meet someone who barely speaks English, but they understand the term NGO, and they love an American who worked there. And so it's just really refreshing to be appreciated And they were just really always so happy to kind of take us in. We were invited for meals over our coworkers' homes. We had outings with people. They just really wanted us to have the best experience of their country as possible. Something I wanted to kind of impart moving forward was the strong presence of the United States Agency for International Development, affectionately known as USAID, with not only the FRC, but so many other initiatives in Sri Lanka. And it had me thinking, how few people know about what great work this agency does and how much of a presence our government has in so many areas of the world. And in the spirit of academia, I'm going to use my momentary position of influence to challenge you with an assignment, and that is to visit usaid.gov to learn more about where our government is supplying humanitarian aid all around the world. It was just amazing when I kind of looked into this. And it even kind of shows you how you can become involved. And so it was really something that I was happy to find while there. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox now. I want to thank you for your time. I hope I sold you on Sri Lanka. And without further ado, I want to introduce Chantal Bouchel, who will enlighten you with her and Jordana Cohen's experience working in Johannesburg, South Africa. So off to Africa we go.
Thank you, Hannah, for that introduction and for the really passionate introduction before that. My name is Chantal Bouchel, and this summer, Jordana Cohen, sitting over there in the pretty dress, and I went to Johannesburg, South Africa. South Africa is the southernmost country on the continent and has a population of approximately 53 million people. It is a vibrant, multiracial, and multi-ethnic country where 11 languages are official: English, Afrikaans, Ndebele, Northern Soto, Swazi, Tsonga, Tswana, Venda, Xhosa, and Zulu. Almost everyone is multilingual, and almost everyone has a story to tell. We stayed in the Melville area of Johannesburg, worked in Braamfontein, and explored everywhere from Sandton to Soweto. As in any big city, there are dangers and warnings to go along with it. But for Johannesburg, those warnings came in giant neon lights from everyone. Well, don't get me wrong, there are very real dangers, such as muggings and holdups, to be avoided. But if you keep your wits about you, this should not stop you from venturing out to experience all that this vigorous city has to offer. Johannesburg and South Africa in general gains its uniqueness from many of the first world comforts and amenities, remnants from their apartheid era. And a certain class of people and many tourists enjoy fine dining and living, fancy malls, and Western goods and products. This country, however, is still undeniably a part of the traditional African continent in regards to beliefs and attitudes around the pacing of time and space. And there are also those rolling blackouts called load shedding, as reminders of apartheid, where the electricity grid was only set up to service the roughly 20% white population and has not been upgraded to accommodate the shift in power and population. It was intense to be in Johannesburg, and exhilarating. South Africa is merely 20 years on the other side of apartheid, and apartheid became law of the land in 1948, and it was a system of racial segregation and restriction of movement officially enacted by the National Party. The first white settlers, the Boers, and later called the Afrikaners, who were Dutch, French, and German descendants, arrived at the Cape of Good Hope in the 1600s and found the Khoikhoi people, and later the more nomadic San people living there. The Boers were a mostly persecuted people themselves, and looked to this land as a place to start anew. With the addition of slave labor in the 17th century, increasingly more of the indigenous population was pushed out of their territory. By the 19th century, the British had arrived in South Africa and imposed their colonialism, which caused friction with the Boer settlers. The discovery of gold and diamonds further complicated matters, and this subsequent power struggle was one of the contributing factors in the South African War between the British and the Boers. And the Boers won that war in 1910. 2 years later, in 1912, the African National Congress, or ANC, was established as a Black African nationalist movement to address racial injustices and Nelson Mandela joined in 1944. Under apartheid, past laws, brutal beatings and detainments, the separation and breakup of families, and raids became routine. Trauma became normative in the society, and a culture of violence was born. After serving 27 years in prison, Mandela was released in 1990, and apartheid was abolished in 1994 when he became president. A society that accepts and endorses violence as a legitimate and acceptable means to resolve problems and achieve goals has its own set of complex consequences. Social and racial inequities, political upheaval, economic and educational disparities, high unemployment and poverty are but few of the deep repercussions even now. From trauma healing and interracial dialogue building to social and professional infrastructure remodeling, South Africa has many issues to tackle. Xenophobic violence in South Africa has received world attention, beginning in 2008 with the first big eruption. Our arrival in Johannesburg this summer coincided with the African Union Summit, and we were very fortunate to have been invited to sit in on several of their conferences, many on xenophobia. Interestingly, whenever a dialogue on xenophobia was broached, there was a marked consensus around dismissing possible psychosocial root causes. We also attended a symposium at the University of Witwatersrand on what makes a violent nation, and in particular, what makes the Republic of South Africa potentially a violent nation. One brilliant psychologist, well, at least I think she's brilliant, proposed considering violence through an attachment lens. Essentially, the concept is, due to South Africa's socio-political history and context, there now exists an entire generation of people who have a disrupted attachment. The idea of voting out the government, even when they're not doing completely right by the people, is tantamount to a vote against your parents or your family, in the sense that these authority figures have replaced the parental ones, which were fragmented during apartheid. To further complicate matters, these same governmental leaders come from traumatic backgrounds themselves. Many of them were the ones who were being detained and tortured, and they now have been accused of not genuinely condemning the xenophobic violence. So according to this psychologist, and her name is Yvette Esprit, violence can stem from the protest phase in attachment theory. On one hand, violence becomes the release of frustration, be it racial or economic. And on the other hand, it is a reuniting with the parental figure. And in this case, looking at xenophobia, it is a reuniting with the parental figure that is the South African people and the government over the foreigner. I might venture even to say that because much of the violence can be described as Afrophobia within xenophobia, due to the fact that only Black African foreigners in South Africa are being attacked, perhaps along with internalized racism, we can analyze this violence as a type of sibling rivalry within the family context. Jordana and I worked with the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation, or CSVR, in Johannesburg. CSVR is a South African non-governmental organization focused on policy formation and implementation, service delivery, education and training, as well as providing consultancy service to address violence in societies. Some of their goals are to build and foster reconciliation, a democratic human rights culture, and to prevent violence in South Africa. Their programs include criminal justice, gender-based violence, peace building, transitional justice, youth violence, and trauma and transition. CSVR has a trauma clinic that provides counseling services to victims and perpetrators of violence, and they employ a rigorous monitoring and evaluation system for their clinical work. Their trauma and transition program provides individual, group, and family counseling, debriefing and crisis intervention for survivors of trauma, training and capacity development in the awareness and containment of trauma, and also psychosocial interventions. Training and education is targeted towards frontline workers as well as specialists and professionals working in the field. The picture above is of a community action group in Ikangala, which is about an hour and a half outside of Johannesburg. These community members, who have all individually experienced many psychosocial challenges, have been trained by CSVR to engage in community welfare interventions. Projects include gender-based violence, xenophobia, and substance abuse. It was an honor to meet them, hear their life stories, and to be called sister, sister, and feel how eager they seem to hear from my perspective. Our work this summer involved conducting clinical interviews with survivors of torture, both from other African nations, and ex-combatants from South Africa's apartheid era. We also assisted in monitoring and evaluation project for the interpreter training program. It is imperative that CSVR interpreters have solid understandings of what constitutes trauma and torture. A test on each was administered to the interpreters before a series of classes on each subject was taught. And then a test was given at the conclusion of the training to analyze the potential change in their knowledge and awareness of these subjects. South Africa is seen as a bastion of opportunity and economic prosperity on the continent, and refugees, many of whom are survivors of torture, arrive there hoping to reclaim their lives. South Africa does not endorse refugee camps, but has also failed to produce an adequate alternative resettling model for many of the refugees who arrive. So upon arrival in South Africa, many refugees experience re-traumatization in the form of reality checks such as lack of housing, lack of employment, a struggle to acquire basic needs, as well as any experience being on the receiving end of xenophobia. Working with survivors of torture was a humbling experience for both of us. Listening and asking about all that they had been through on their journeys to South Africa was excruciating at times. I remember one man's story of being tortured by government officials in his home country, Ethiopia, and then arriving in South Africa to be the victim of severe xenophobic attacks by his neighbors. Worse, he has epilepsy, which makes him an even bigger target because many don't understand his seizures. A woman I met with was a witness to the torture of her brother, who was then shot right in front of her in her home country of Somalia. And then she arrived in South Africa to get into a horrific car accident where her only other brother was killed instantly from the impact. Their pain, their stories, their journeys have left indelible marks on my experience. I'm no longer the same. Their strength and perseverance is as formidable as it is a testimony to the resilience of humanity. We needed some play some of the time. Sure, there was the comedy show outing where many of the punchlines to jokes flew way overhead, but that didn't even matter because just being there and witness to the vibe and laughter in the room was a thrill. And there was enjoying a Mexican-American night over the July 4th weekend. But by far, biltong was the star. Beef or game biltong, and this we ate anytime and anywhere and all of the time. A lot. There was also the more serious outings, the Apartheid Museum, Nelson Mandela's house in Soweto. Soweto is a former township established under apartheid where Black Africans were forced to live, and it was also the venue for uprisings that garnered world attention to the situation in South Africa. The main street in Soweto, Vilakazi Street, is the only street in the world where 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners have resided, Nelson Mandela and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The Palace of Justice in Pretoria, where the Rivonia trial took place in 1963, and where Mandela, along with other ANC freedom fighters, were charged with treason, found guilty, and given life sentences. A town called Sophia, which was destroyed by the apartheid government because it served as a covert area for interracial fraternizing. This demolition led to the establishment of townships such as Soweto. And finally, Hillbrow, with the tallest residential skyscraper in Africa, has a similar history to Sophia Town of interracial commingling, but it was turned into a ghetto instead through a punishment of ripping away all civic services. No trash pickup anymore, no street cleaning, intermittent electricity and water. So a familiar result, Hillbrow quickly becomes stigmatized as a bad neighborhood where criminals live. And many residents now are trying to dig themselves out from under those impressions. A phenomenon I noticed in South Africa in various social and professional settings is this elegant, passionate articulation all around. Most people, regardless of race, ethnicity, they seem able to express themselves with such eloquence, at least in English. Perhaps it's the multilingual cultural aspect that factors into it, but the average parlance there is super fluent. And in basic everyday conversations with anyone, verbal crutches such as or like, they don't often come up. Furthermore, many people seem adept at summarizing or introducing a topic with such mastery on the fly, especially those related to socio-political topics. In South Africa, everyone's experience is visceral, and everyone has an opinion to share about life, post, and during apartheid. But all the stories I heard lead to one. This is a country healing from trauma. These are a people searching to define who they are. No one has escaped untouched. And yet human rights and equality for all are paramount in their constitution. We the people, it begins. They're the 5th country in the world to legalize same-sex marriage. South Africa truly is a unique country on the brink of monumental socio-political shifts. It was fascinating, and it was difficult to be there. I knew just as soon as I left that I would want to go back. This is a country to watch. The effects of an immediate transition of power after injustice, as opposed to a gradual, albeit turbulent, coming into equity that's been happening here in the US. That spawns complex societal issues. The Born Frees movement is as beautiful as it is powerful. I just love the concept. This generation that was born post-1994, post-apartheid, they are the heirs. And I cannot wait to see how and what they develop and create. Thank you. I would like to now introduce Carissa, who will be speaking about her country's experiences, her group's experiences in Malawi.
Hello. I'm Carissa, and I am representing the Malawi group. So I spent the summer in Malawi, in Mzuzu, Malawi, with Courtney Curran, and Sasha Brown, and Ophelia Song. Sitting in places. So Bobo is how you say hello in Tumbuka, which was the regional language of the area that we were in. I put a good effort into learning more of the language, but didn't go very far in 2 months. So Malawi is a pretty small country. It has a population of about 16 million people. It's sandwiched kind of between Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. So we lived up in the north of the country in a small city, Mzuzu, which you can see is pointed to by that red arrow. Malawi is a relatively poor country, and their Human Development Index score is 0.418. Anything below 0.493 is considered low human development, so they're pretty low. For comparison, the US scored 0.914, which is significantly higher. Life expectancy is about 58 for men, 60 for women. About 66% of the population lives in poverty. The average person has less than 5 years of education, and the literacy rate is only 61%. But almost 70% of the population is currently enrolled in education. Malawi was colonized by the British in the mid-1800s and achieved full independence in 1964. So a lot of the population speaks pretty good English, which was a huge help to us while we were there. There are over 32 languages spoken in Malawi. The official languages of the country are English and Chichewa. Chichewa is the regional language of the central region, which is where the capital city is, which is kind of how it became the official language. And kids in school learn both English and Chichewa, along with whatever it is that they speak at home. The regional language of the area around Mzuzu was Tumbuka, so most of the people that we were around spoke Tumbuka fluently. A lot of people had migrated up from the central region, so they spoke Chichewa pretty fluently, and kids learn it in school anyways, so they'd have some grasp of it at least, and almost everybody but the young children had a really good grasp of English. As for religion, most of the country is actually Christian. It's again due to the settlement. But a large portion is Islamic, and there are still people who follow folk religions and other religions. So, while we were in Malawi, we worked with St. John of God Hospitaller Services. It was founded by a sect of Catholicism known as the Brothers of St. John of God. The brothers arrived in Malawi in 1993 and set up the community mental health services there. They're actually expanding right now, which is really exciting. They're opening a new center in Lilongwe, and they're going to increase their capacity to serve people by about 150%, which is huge. And St. John of God has a ton of different programs. They're really kind of spanning the whole of what the majority of what the country probably needs for mental health, and they're doing it from a relatively small area in Mzuzu, which is very impressive. We were able to be involved in most of these services while we were there, which was really cool for us. So the first one that I want to talk about is the outpatient clinic. The outpatient clinic at St. John of God offers psychiatric and psychosocial services. The highlight of my time there, we each a couple of us anyways, spent a couple weeks there, and we all were somehow involved in it, which was really cool. And so I spent a couple weeks shadowing people there and helping out wherever I could. And the highlight of my time there was going with them to their outreach clinics. Because so much of the rural population around Mizuzu is unable to find transportation into the city for psychiatric assessments or to refill their medications, St. John of God has established outpatient clinics in many of the villages around the city. A nurse and a doctor travel together to visit these clinics, which can be up to several hours' drive away on really terrible roads. And they visit each one about once a month to prescribe or to refill medication and to offer short psychoeducation lessons on different topics. While I was there one day, one man told me that he had walked for almost 2 days and camped overnight outside the clinic just to get his medication. So it's pretty amazing that they're able to get out there and get the medication to these people. A lot of it is for psychotic disorders or for epilepsy was what they seem to see most of. So again, really important. So they also offer some services specifically for children. And first, they offer, don't laugh. They offer special education schools for children with developmental disabilities. They work with families as well as the children, which is really great because there's a lot of stigma around developmental disabilities or mental disabilities in the area. So they offer support groups for the parents of these children. And Ophelia, in particular, spent a few weeks there helping out. Sasha and I spent most of our time with the Emoza program, which is why they're laughing, because I really love these kids. I fell in love with them. It's a psychosocial program for street kids, mostly orphan children, children with unstable home lives, or children living in poverty. We helped out in their special needs classroom a lot, which the organization runs for students who, for whatever reason, are unable to join the normal public schools, whether it's because they're just too far behind, they have some sort of developmental disability, something like that, but for whatever reason, they're unable to get them back into public education, so they run their own special classroom for them. We also went on some street outreach trips where we walked around the city looking for kids to recruit to the program. A lot of the kids end up on the streets trying to sell bits of junk plastic or something to just bring home a little extra money to their families or to get by themselves. So they really try and pull the kids off the street into more productive activities, like school. We did a lot of activities with the kids, which were all really awesome. One of those activities was the Day of an African Child, which is actually a day that comes out of South Africa. It's in commemoration of a massacre of children that took place a number of years ago in South Africa. I believe the year was 1991, and the kids were protesting. It was a school of kids protesting against apartheid, and they were killed, which was, very sad. And the day has become a really actually wonderful, I think, celebration of and really emphasis of like a fight for child rights. Every year they pick a different theme, and this year the theme was the fight to end child marriage. There were songs, there were dances, there were plays, there were speeches. A bunch of school kids got together. They put on little skits. Most of it was in Tumbuka or Chichewa, not English, so there was a lot of humor going on that we didn't catch. But you didn't even really have to understand what they were saying to feel like you were a part of the inspiration and the enthusiasm and the passion and the fun. It was really fun. The kids from our program put on really wonderful dances, and we were very impressed with them. This picture is of some of the kids holding up protest signs that we helped make. It was just a really amazing day, and awesome to really see a lot of that activism coming from the people who are involved. So one of the other programs that they run is the Addiction and Recovery Center. It's the only substance abuse treatment center in Malawi. Mostly they treat people with addictions to alcohol and marijuana, and alcoholism is a problem in Malawi. About 50% of the population drinks, and about 8% are considered heavy users. So Ophelia and Courtney both spent some time there, helping to run psychotherapy groups and activities with the participants and helping the staff evaluate and redesign their program, which is pretty cool. They were pretty helpful. And we also spent some time at the Institute of Vocational Training, which has a special place in all of our hearts. This is a program geared towards helping vulnerable populations, mostly women and people with mental illness or mental and physical disabilities, gain economic stability by training them in a vocation of their choice. They offer courses in home management, tailoring and textiles, computer studies, carpentry, bricklaying, horticulture, and they also do a community soap making group for people who aren't necessarily part of the classes but who want to participate in something. Pictured here is part of the home management class. They did a lot of cooking and they cooked really awesome food. Really awesome food. They taught us how to make Malawi donuts, which were amazing, and I don't know about these other guys, but I haven't tried the recipe myself yet. I'm afraid to mess it up. But it was very exciting. So overall, I feel like we all learned a lot from our time in Malawi, like the importance of flexibility, of going with the flow, the importance of curiosity, which I bring up because it's something that I felt like I already had, and I do feel like I already had it, but I think there's something really different about going to another culture, and how are you curious in a polite way, and also how are you curious in a productive way. And it was just really cool also to see people really realize that you really want to know, and you really care, and you're really interested, and how much they open up and they want to tell you. And I had some amazing conversations just sitting with people and talking about their religion, or sitting with kids, and the kids who don't speak English very well, but trying to explain. These kids taught me how to play a card game, and it took me all summer to learn how to play this card game, because most of the kids who were trying to teach me were the little ones who didn't speak any English at all. I spoke about 3 words of grammatically incorrect Tumbuka. So it was a really cool experience to just, be there and be able to feel like you had that communication, whether or not people could speak the same language. So it was a really valuable experience for all of us, and a really cool experience, and we really hope we left them with as much as we took with us. So, Tawanga, thank you. I would like to introduce Hallie Nurnberg, who's going to talk about Ghana.
Thank you, Carissa. Ananwula, good evening. My name is Hallie Nurnberg, and I spent my summer working with Basic Needs Ghana in Tamale. Ghana is a West African country bordered by Togo to the east, Burkina Faso to the north, and the Ivory Coast to the west. It has a population of just under 26 million and is about the same size as the state of Oregon. English is the official language. However, most people's first language is one of the 81 ethnic languages spoken throughout the country. Approximately 71% of Ghanaians are Christian, 18% Muslim, 5% practice traditional beliefs, and about 5% do not hold a religion. The 3rd largest city in Ghana, Tamale, is home to about 350,000 people and is the largest city in the semi-arid northern region. The main tribal group there is the Dagomba, and the most common language is Dagbani. Approximately 85% of the region identify as Muslim, followed by 6% as Catholic. There has been a European presence in Ghana since the 1400s, when the Portuguese set up a trading post, first for gold and second for the slave trade. Monuments such as the Elmina Slave Castle, pictured in the bottom 2 photos, can be visited throughout the country. In 1874, Ghana became a British colony. The effects of the European emphasis on trade over centuries can still be felt in many ways. The most obvious of which is the difference in infrastructure between the southern areas, which offer access to the sea, and the rural northern areas, which lag far behind in development. In 1957, Ghana became the first African country to gain independence. The first 30 years after which were characterized by economic hardships and military coup. In 1981, Jerry Rawlings took power and ruled until 2000, when a constitutional democracy was instituted. For the past 15 years, Ghana has enjoyed a stable democracy that many point to as an example for the West African region. According to the Office of Bureau and Labor Statistics, there are 390 psychiatrists in the state of Colorado. According to the World Health Organization, there are 18 in Ghana. In Colorado, there are over 2,500 psychologists and counselors. In Ghana, there are 19. I could go on to compare categories, but it is clear that the mental health system as we understand it here simply does not exist in Ghana. This is especially true outside of the southern part of the country where most of the service provision is located. This is even emphasized more by regular shortages in psychotropic medication, and many people are unable to receive quality mental health care. Due to these gaps in care, as well as cultural concepts of mental illness, it has been estimated that as many as 70% of the population that suffers from mental illness and epilepsy seek care from traditional healers. While many of these healers likely provide significant support to hundreds of people each year, a series of Human Rights Watch reports over the last 5 years have detailed human rights abuses, including being involuntarily held in prayer camps. In 2012, to address issues of human rights abuse and the lack of service availability, Ghana's Ministry of Health passed Act 846. However, much of the Mental Health Act has yet to be implemented fully. Founded in 2000, the mission of Basic Needs is to enable people with mental illness or epilepsy and their families to live and work successfully in their communities by combining health, socioeconomic, and community-oriented solutions with changes in policy, practice, and resource allocation. The central tenet of the Basic Needs philosophy is the mental health and development model, which comprises of 5 components: capacity building, community mental health, livelihood training, research, and collaboration. This model is implemented in 16 programs in 12 countries: China, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Laos, Kenya, Nepal, India, Sudan, Ghana, Pakistan, Tanzania, and Uganda. The office I worked in Ghana was founded in 2012 as an independent organization utilizing the Basic Needs mental health and development model. There were thunderstorms in Denver on the night of June 4th, 2015. That was the night that I flew out. The week preceding had also brought unusually heavy rains to Ghana's capital city of Accra. Poorly designed and blocked drainage systems led to standing water in many parts of the city. On the afternoon of June 3rd, several people had taken shelter from the rain under the awning of a oil gas station in a busy part of town near a major bus terminal. While reports differ, it seems that there was a leak in one of the gas lines, which caused gas to float on the surface of the standing water. A spark in a generator, and the entire place exploded. The best estimate is that 150 people lost their lives that day. When I arrived a few days later, the country was in mourning, and the tragedy had gripped the hearts of many in the country. Every TV, radio, and print news source ran stories about the problems that allowed for such an event to occur. In the midst of these articles were a few voices highlighting the mental health impacts of such a tragedy. These voices pointed to 5 organizations: the Mental Health Authority of Ghana, the Ghana Psychological Association, the Department of Psychiatry at the Ghana Medical School, the Ghana Psychology Council, and the Calvary Baptist Church, which were providing psychosocial support services. Through conversations with Basic Needs Ghana Executive Director Peter Yaro, we realized that the same level of service following such a disaster would not be available in other parts of the country, such as the north where I was located. Given that I am pursuing a degree in disaster psychology, the attention to the country on this disaster offered me a tragic opportunity to contribute to the discussion brought forward by others on the mental health impacts of a disaster. Through a policy brief, I was able to highlight that mental health matters not only affect those with serious mental illness and psychosis, but that mental health is a community issue. And by expanding community health services, we can help the whole community become more resilient. I mentioned the foundation of the Basic Needs philosophy is the mental health and development model. The beautiful thing about this model is that it is a holistic intervention that seeks to provide support, not just for a person's illness, but for the entire family's ability to support and care for that person as part of a larger community. Working with other NGOs, local hospitals, service providers, traditional healers, and government officials, Basic Needs is able to reach people efficiently and effectively while empowering communities to support each other. While researching mental health responses to disaster, I came across a guide that was put together by the Basic Needs Office in Sri Lanka following the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. This guide adapted on the already existing mental health and development model by redefining community mental health to focus on psychosocial support. In addition to strengthening of social support networks, they realized that many people lost their ability to generate income in the tsunami and were unable to regain independence. We know that feeling a sense of control over a situation, engaging in productive activity, and returning to routine are keys to successful recovery. For this reason, capacity building, sustainable livelihoods, and research efforts are still vital in response efforts. The adaptation of the mental health and development model capitalizes on the unique position that Basic Needs is in to respond holistically to the mental health needs of a population following disaster. Building on the adaptation of the mental health and development model, I hosted 2 trainings on psychological first aid, which has been promoted as a leading technique in providing psychosocial support in response to disaster. The first training was a brief 2-hour introduction as part of a Basic Needs half-year partner review meeting in Accra. In addition, towards the end of my time in Tamale, I did a 4-hour follow-up training for the program staff of Basic Needs Ghana. In addition to disaster mental health initiatives, I attempted to be helpful however possible and did everything from writing and editing articles to dusting off the resource library and making recommendations for additional resources. I also had the opportunity to go into the field to witness the formation of a community self-help group in a small village outside of Tamale. One of the most difficult things about traveling abroad is attempting to describe the experience to people when you get home. I went to Tamale looking to challenge myself, to push myself outside of my comfort zone, to find where my boundaries are, and through this, to learn more about myself. Without a doubt, I succeeded on that front. Indeed, one of the biggest challenges came my first weekend in Tamale when Ibrahim, the security guard, gave me a guinea fowl, a local pheasant delicacy and sign of honor, with the expectation that I would kill, cook, and eat it. Now, I'm not proud to say that the meat I eat here in the States, I buy pre-plucked and pre-killed from the grocery store. So for me, a person dedicated to rescuing spiders, this was daunting to say the least. I wish I could say I overcame my fear, but in the end, I could not deliver the fatal blow. I did, however, pluck, dissect, cook, and eat it, and it wasn't that bad. This summer, I also drank water from a bag. I saw goats on motorcycles. I learned how shea butter is made, and I ate goat organs. I learned to be part of society, I had to eat like a Ghanaian. That is, with my hands out of the communal dish. Each night, I would break the fast of Ramadan and share a meal with the security guards. Afterwards, we would have conversations on everything from the distance to the moon, to polygamy, to whether witches exist, to Judgment Day, to the why the US passed same-sex marriage, and whether we would make Ghana do the same. Sometimes these conversations fascinated me. Other times, they exhausted me. Yet, it was these conversations and the connection that came from them that were the most meaningful part of my experience. Often, when we go to countries different than our own, especially to learn about issues of mental health and trauma, it is easy to focus on problems. Yet, I think that it is just as important to recognize the beauty in each country. From the elephants in Mole National Park, to the crocodile ponds on the Burkina Faso border, to the golden beaches of Cape Three Points, Ghana is a beautiful country. So I leave you with these photos that aren't here in hopes that you too can have some appreciation of the dynamic nature of such a country as Ghana. On behalf of my entire cohort, I want to thank you all for spending your evening as we journeyed around the world via PowerPoint. I hope you all have a good evening and good night. So with that, I think I'm opening it up to more questions or mingling or, oh, Catherine's going to say something. That's okay.
Hallie, I'm so sorry, and I love you so much. I will share those pictures with everybody if you leave your email address or something. We can get that taken care of. So one of the things that we didn't do when we started was for us as a cohort to personally thank our faculty members. Without your support and all the things that you taught us and answering our very, very long emails over the summer and offering to Skype with us and really being helpful and then being there to process our experiences when we get home and being the people who really wanted to hear everything, like not just the fun stuff and like what did you eat, like the really, really hard stuff to talk about. Like we didn't get to talk about that with a lot of other people. So I wanted to make sure that before we left tonight that you had an opportunity to be recognized. So if you have been one of our faculty members within the past year or so, if you could stand so that you can be publicly acknowledged, that would be lovely. Thank you. So we are a small cohort of 13. I believe that the first year students is a cohort of 22, 21, 22. How many? 21. That is almost twice as many as us. But I hope that you come and you watch their journeys next year. It has been so powerful for me to go through this, to watch the presentations from last year, and I will be here. I live in Colorado, so I'll be here every year, like forever. So I will always come, but I hope that you will join us again next year to see what they've learned and share their journey. And thank you so much for being here to support us and to learn from us. And we're excited for you, and you all are pretty awesome, and you're going to do great things. So we're excited to see what you do. Oh, and then like questions or something? I don't know.
Well, those presentations were descriptive and passionate, just wonderful. So let's give the group another hand. Are there any questions from the crowd for our students? No, not really. Not really. So let's mingle, and thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate it, and join us again next year, please. All right, have a good evening.